On the line, we've got one special guest, Mr. Pat Mastelotto. Pat, how you doing this morning, baby?
I'm doing good. Pretty good.
Pretty good. I'm glad to hear it. We're excited to have you on the program. You are going to be coming to the Bay Area with Stickmen performing January 17th at the Regency. And we're excited because you got a brand new record, the Prog Noir record. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about this record and kind of get everybody psyched up about this show that you guys are going to be doing. First off, I got to ask you, you grew up in the Bay Area. You're going to be coming kind of back to the Bay Area. What is it like for you kind of returning? I guess you're just going to be in for a night, but returning with this group. And do you get a little bit of nostalgia when you come back to the Bay Area?
I always do, man. You got to know that. I'm born in Chico, Northern California, and grew up all over Northern California. But as you can imagine, going to San Francisco was the big thrill for me growing up, to go down with my parents to Haight-Ashbury or to see shows at the Fillmore.
Right.
Actually, not the Fillmore, but Blind Faith at the Oakland Coliseum. And
oh, wow.
Gigs later at Winterland. I have a lot of memories. And then I did second or third grade. I think it was third grade in Daly City. So Ralph Williams Ford,
Right.
I know that pretty well down there in Pacifica. We're in Pacifica. And I actually first saw King Crimson, the band I play with quite a bit, at the Cow Palace in about 1974. They were the opening act for 10 years after. So, yeah, I always get a big buzz when I come back up to play in San Francisco. I remember way back in the 80s with my band, Mr. we opened for Adam Ant. I think it was at the Civic that was right downtown.
Is that right?
And I'd seen the Who there when I was a kid do the Who's Next tour. So I wore my Keith Moon Bullseye shirt, and get as a young player, and you go up and you play these same venues you've seen your heroes. It's always a thrill.
That is exciting. I mean, obviously you've been doing it for a long time, and of course you're playing with Stickmen here in town. Can you tell us a little bit about it? You got this brand new record out, and we were just playing some tracks from it, and it sounds phenomenal. But can you tell us a little bit about the new record, how it kind of came about, and what the process was like putting these tracks together?
Sure. Well, the first thing to know about Stickmen is it's Tony Levin, who plays bass as well, with Peter Gabriel and all sorts of other artists, but he also plays the Chapman stick, which
right.
is like a touch instrument. So he plays with both hands. So he can play bass and melody and solos and chords, all from one instrument. And he made a record called Stick Man, a solo record that featured the stick, and then wanted to tour some of that. So we picked up another stick player who has left the band, but then we found a great player, a friend of mine, Marcus Reuter. He lives over in Germany, and he played stick, but now he plays a more advanced version of that he's developed his own instrument, but same tapping technique. So what's really unique is that both guys can be the soloist or the bass player. So it's always overlapping, and they're always exchanging parts. And what's unique about this particular record, we've done about 5 or 6, 7 records. I'm not sure even how many.
Right.
But we do a lot of passing files because Tony lives up near Woodstock, and I live in Austin, Texas now, and Marcus lives in Berlin. So we do a lot of file sharing and passing the tapes around. But this time, Tony went over to Berlin and spent a week or so with Marcus in the very beginning, and that laid out the framework for some of the early writing. And then the writing actually continued for well over a year. While Crimson was touring, Tony had a studio set up in his hotel every day.
Oh, wow.
And did a lot of the writing like that. So there's been a lot longer process for this particular record, and it features 4 or 5 songs with lyric and vocals, which is a little different for us. We usually
Right.
only have 1 or 2 vocal records. I think this record might be about half vocal. You were just playing The Tempest there. That's the one
Right.
we're working on today. I'm up in Seattle. We grabbed a couple of rehearsals. Our first gig is tomorrow. We had a 4 a.m. Fire alarm at the hotel.
Oh,
so we've
jeez.
been out on the curb in the freezing cold there last night for a couple hours, and nobody went back to sleep. So it's kind of a ding-dong day here today.
Right. Wow. So let me ask you. You're rehearsing right now for these shows. What is a rehearsal for Stickmen when you guys are? I mean, obviously some of these parts are very complex. The interplay. I mean, are you just rehearsing a certain track that you want to introduce to the show, or how does that happen when you guys are on the road?
Yeah, well, first off, if we've taken a break, which we have, we last toured was in Europe in October. And previous to that, I can't remember. I think we did an extensive tour last spring in the USA and North America, up in Canada. So with these big gaps, it's really important you get in at least a day ahead of time to make sure your gear is all there,
sure,
and that your gear functions. And if you have different patches and programs from one band to the next, because it's a disaster if you show up and you're missing one cable that's a unique cable or some
right,
component of your setup. So that's the first priority with these rehearsals. And then just to play through the material that we've been playing, just to refresh ourselves and make sure our patches work and things like that. But we also wanted to add a song, so that's why we grabbed an extra day of rehearsal here before we start in Seattle. We had learned 4 or 5 songs last year, newer songs. So this time we wanted to focus on learning the track Tempest. And the trickiest bit about that is that Marcus and Tony will each sing and play bass in different sections. So they have to work out the trade-off spots, which is just a little awkward. Usually you're just dedicated to playing one position in a band, and then you sing or do something else on top of it. But they have to remember when they're supposed to throw the ball to the other guy.
Right. I read there's you mentioned it in some interviews and it's on your website, but you talk about when you do some touring, traveling with drum sets is kind of a toss up. Sometimes you show up into town and you're using house sets or whatnot. Is that occurring on this particular slew of shows?
No. I mean, obviously with King Crimson, we have a big crew and a big budget. We
Sure.
take all of our own equipment. But on smaller gigs like Stickman, the level we're at, especially internationally or fly-in one-off gigs, we have to use local drum sets. And in South America or Eastern Europe, some places those can get pretty sad.
Right.
But this tour is not like that. We actually brought our own equipment out. Our guy drove out from about a week and a half ago from New York, took a nice slow drive to Seattle, so we have our own equipment, and we'll use that for this tour.
Okay, I was wondering. I mean, that would be, I could imagine, disaster happening. Showing up and not having certain equipment that obviously you depend
I
on.
always travel with my electronics, my samplers, the basics. I have 2 suitcases like a normal traveler that I check, and those are mostly very little clothes. It's almost all just gear. And then another unique thing about this band is Tony and Marcus, they don't use amplifiers. We just use in-ear monitoring and all these processing devices that they use, so they don't actually have amplifiers on stage. So that cuts down a lot on the travel.
That's very, very interesting because of the sound. I mean, the combination of the instruments. Obviously with the drums, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is the use of the electronic, I guess, like the pads and the electronic drums. And I mean, you're no stranger to that kind of aspect of it. How do you balance the acoustic drum with the electronic pads? How does that work for you?
Yeah, well, you mean in terms of, I think, the balance of audio balance of mixing, and that's a tricky one because acoustic drums are very dynamic, and you hit the instrument, just what you're going to get, depending on how hard your velocity is. But not the case with drum pads and samplers. You have to adjust all those levels, and then, on stage, sometimes things don't react the way you expect. So I keep a mixer, a small sub-mixer right near my hi-hat. So I'm down there with my left hand just adjusting the little bit of the volumes as we play. As far as how it fits into the music, that just depends on the songs as they're presented.
Right.
If it's something that feels visceral, like the song you heard there, Tempest, that's very much just primal drumming to me.
Right.
But some things need a little bit more embellishment or a little bit of more assistance for me to flesh out the drum parts. Going back to a song like Broken Wings with Mr. Mister in the 80s, that was a machine bass drum sequenced, as well as the bass. It's not really a bass guitar, it's a DX7 keyboard, but those were sequenced to be super tight, and then I just played the acoustic drums on top of that.
Right.
So that's sort of the mixture I tend to do is I use the acoustic drummer as this primal energy source. And then when I need something that's very sophisticated and consistent and maybe a little bit too syncopated to actually play, then that stuff I filter over to the machines and find a way to either program it or play it.
You also must obviously over the years must have developed a technical prowess to work on some of these machines, because obviously some of these machines are several years old, older technology that you might not be able to locate nowadays. I would imagine that's another talent of yours that doesn't go
very true, man. And most of those drum machines now are in the garage. You can do almost everything just with an iPhone app.
Right.
But it is curious. I know it was about 10 or 15 years ago, but I got an emergency call from the guys recording with Cheap Trick, and they needed to find a QX7, I believe it was called, which was an old Yamaha device that guys remembered I used to use when we had floppy disks.
Of course.
Yeah. So, and they had stored some data on that format, and
Wow.
they were trying to just find a way to pull it back for one of their greatest hits records.
That is
I think
incredible.
It's pretty common as the technology moves ahead. The old gear just gets left in the closet.
Right. It's amazing. Jumping topics real quick. You mentioned obviously Tony Levin, who's he's a fantastic musician in his own right, and you guys also play a lot of the time with King Crimson, and it was just announced that you're going to be going back on tour with Crimson in 2017. And this is supposed to be I guess a different configuration of musicians. It's a double quartet, if I'm not mistaken. It is 4 drummers at one point or another playing simultaneously on stage. How do you shift between Stickmen gigs where you're the signature timekeeper, and then you go into a group where you're playing in an ensemble? How do you kind of offset these two parts of your brain?
Well, with a bit of restraint, I guess.
Right.
Crimson has been active again since about 2014, and we toured North America that year. It was a 7-man band with 3 drummers, Bill Leifland, myself, and Gavin Harrison. And last year, we were touring in Europe, and Bill had a conflict and was ill and couldn't do it. So rather than cancel the dates, they located another guy that knew Gavin and Jacko, and his name is Jeremy Stacy. He's a fantastic drummer, and not only that, but he plays keyboards because the drummer, Bill or Jeremy, has to double on some keyboard parts. So also Bill Leifland played keyboards. So then what's unique about this year coming up here is that we're coming back to America, and Bill Leifland's healthy again to join us, but we're not going to let Jeremy go. So we're going to become a 4-drummer band. But both Jeremy and Bill play keyboards, so there'll be a little switching off to that. But I know there'll be a lot of the show where there'll be all 4 of us drumming at once. And that just takes a lot of rehearsal and conversation and a certain amount of giving space, letting go of some places you might like to play to create holes for the other guys. So you just go at it song at a time.
Right. What
works on one song might not work on the next song. So,
are there any kind of surprises, I guess, with this tour and this group, this ensemble with the 8 players? Is there anything that we can expect that's going to be different from, I guess, the previous tours in America?
Absolutely. Since the band toured in 2014, we toured quite a bit since then. We've toured in 15 and 16 all over the world, so we've added a lot more songs. So we probably have at least another hour's worth of material that the band didn't have. And this is old material from early Crimson records. So the fans are just blown away when we step on stage and play a piece like Fracture or One More Red Nightmare, songs that had never been played or only played a few times in the mid-'70s. Because this ensemble has the musicianship and enough players to fill the parts out, Robert is pulling back to a lot of the material from those early records. Which were not the most successful records.
Right.
The first record, Core of the Crimson King, with 21st Century Schizoid Man, was a huge record, but the 2 or 3 records after that didn't necessarily reach as many people. So they're real cult favorites within the, Crimson fans are sort of like deadheads.
Right.
Some of these people have been with us for 50 years, I guess, almost.
It's incredible, and I mean, in some of those rare records, kind of find their audience over time. You know what I mean? So when you go out on tour and you play something from one of those records that weren't commercially successful, people are they're waiting, they're hoping to hear some of those tracks. So I imagine that's going to be a crowd pleaser when you unveil some of those earlier performances.
Absolutely. I mean, I love seeing when I can see the audience and see their face light up as we start one and they recognize what we're playing.
I can imagine. You know, I know you're busy and you're gonna be you gotta get back to rehearsal. I was gonna ask you. You know, you do so many of these shows with Crimson and obviously Stickmen's doing these shows, and you do a lot of touring. How much would you say you're on the road per year with doing these groups?
I would say too much. It's reached a point of overload. I've got a couple other projects as well that I enjoy doing, and we've made new records, so we want to go out and support those records and try to help promote them. So the best I can do is fly my wife out as often as possible.
Right.
So I'm going to fly her into Sacramento. Just a few days before San Francisco, we're going to go up together and see my dad in Northern California. He's getting pretty old now. I don't get to see him that often. So part of the thing when we took this West Coast tour, I told the guys I want to grab 2 days just before San Francisco I can take off. So Tony Levin's actually going to go to Napa somewhere and do a poetry reading.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, he's a great bass player on all these records. He's a great songwriter, but he's also a great photographer. He's done photography for his whole life and put out books of photography and different things. But he's also been writing poetry for a long time.
Wow.
And so he assembled all that into a book last year that he put out. So they took advantage of the fact that me, Pat, the drummer, wants to split off for 2 days
right.
and book Tony up in Napa, Sonoma somewhere for a poetry
That's great.
gig.
That is great. Well, I got to say, Pat, I want to thank you so much. It's an honor to speak with you, have you on the program. And we're looking forwards to the gig on the 17th here in San Francisco. I'm going to be at that show. I'm going to hopefully take some photographs and share that online with our fans and our listeners. But I want to wish you guys the best of success for the new record, Prog Noir. It's available on, you have a Bandcamp site for the group through your label, and I'll post that up online. But you can pick up the record there. And where else can people catch you online?
Oh, I guess Amazon. If I was a shopper these days, I would just go to Amazon, and you'll find it there.
Sure. Okay.
The normal pipelines. It's in some stores, but I don't know if there even are. When I was a kid growing up in San Francisco, we had Tower Records.
Right.
You go shoot off to North Beach to Tower, which, funny enough, Bill Rieflin used to work at that Tower Records.
Is that right?
So we're all connected back to San Francisco,
And it comes full circle. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Pat. I wish you the best of luck and have a great rehearsal. And we'll see you. We'll see you on the 17th.
Okay, Eddie. Thanks a lot, man.
You got it, baby. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Okay. Ciao, man.
Ciao. There it is. Pat Mastelotto.